wow, this Blackhawk helicopter crash near Reagan National. It's a real tragedy. But, it also got me thinking, it's a unique chance to learn some pretty powerful English vocabulary and grammar, too.
Yeah.
We're going to be kind of dissecting the language, all the words and stuff they use to describe, a complex event like this. And trust me, you'll be surprised how much you can pick up.
So should we start by setting the scene a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
25 involved a Blackhawk helicopter and an American Airlines plane, flight AA5342.
Okay.
The plane was getting ready to land on runway 33, which, as you can imagine, takes it right over the Potomac River.
The Potomac, I mean, can you picture it? The Pentagon, the Washington Monument.
Hmm.
It's such a stunning flight path, but also, incredibly busy airspace. I mean, not only do you have all these planes coming and going,
Yeah.
but the Potomac itself, it's like a corridor for helicopters, too.
That's right. And that's a key detail here. This whole convergence of air traffic. You've got the landmarks, the river. It creates this like visually demanding environment for the pilots. They need a high level of what we call situational awareness, basically the ability to just really understand what's happening all around them.
Makes sense. And that brings us to our first language lesson, idioms. Idioms can be a little tricky because their meaning isn't always obvious, just from the words themselves. One idiom that popped up in the source material was laser focused. They use this to describe the pilots during landing.
Right, exactly. Laser focused. I mean, it really implies this intense level of concentration.
Yeah.
Think about the focus you need when you're landing a plane, especially in a busy airspace like this. Laser focus, just it captures it perfectly.
So instead of saying the pilot was concentrating hard,
Yeah.
you could say laser focused, and it just paints this much more vivid picture.
It's more impactful. It sounds more natural.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's move on to phrasal verbs.
All right.
Now these can be tough for English learners because the meaning can change, depending on what preposition you attach to the verb. In this case, we've got the phrase short final.
Okay. I've heard that before, but I'm not entirely sure what it means.
Short final. It's an aviation term, refers to that last leg of the approach to landing. So imagine the plane is descending, lining up with the runway. That final stretch, just moments before touchdown. That's short final.
Ah, I see. So short is modifying the meaning of final to give it this very specific meaning about landing. That's really interesting. I can see how understanding that structure can help me figure out other phrasal verbs in the future.
Exactly. And that's what makes mastering them so rewarding. It just adds so much nuance and precision to your English.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so we've got idioms, we've got phrasal verbs. What other kind of language gems are waiting for us in this deep dive?
Well, next we'll be getting into some more advanced vocabulary. It's really crucial for understanding aviation and just, complex events in general. Things like transponder and instrument flight rules, IFR, essential for grasping the intricacies of this crash.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive in.
So a transponder, think of it like the aircraft's electronic beacon.
Okay.
It sends out this signal that air traffic control uses to identify the plane, track its location, its altitude, speed, all that.
So it's kind of like the airplane's fingerprint, I guess.
Yeah.
Making sure everyone knows who's who up there.
Yeah, exactly. Essential for keeping things organized, preventing collisions, especially in busy airspace.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about those instrument flight rules? IFR, you said. Sounds pretty technical.
They are, and crucial in situations like this crash. IFR, it's a whole set of rules. They govern how pilots operate when they can't just rely on what they see. They have to use their instruments to navigate, talk to air traffic control, stay safely separated from other planes.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the connection to the crash here.
Yeah.
Are you saying maybe the Blackhawk pilot wasn't operating under IFR, and that's why they might have missed something important?
It's a possibility investigators will be looking into. The source material, it talks about IFR and then contrasts it with visual flight rules, VFR.
Okay.
Under VFR, pilots are relying more on what they can see to navigate, avoid other aircraft. VFR is fine in some conditions, but it's definitely riskier in congested airspace or when visibility is limited.
So if the Blackhawk was flying VFR in such a busy area, that could have led to them misidentifying the passenger plane.
Could have. The source, it points out that IFR flights, they usually get priority in controlled airspace, like around Reagan National. Meaning, if you're flying VFR, you got to be extra careful about observing, communicating with other planes.
Wow, this really shows how every little detail matters in aviation. Speaking of crucial elements, what about that proverb you mentioned earlier? A chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Oh, yeah. Powerful analogy, right?
Hmm.
It shows how just one single point of failure in any complex system can lead to disaster.
Right. It's a reminder that in aviation, and probably a lot of other fields, everything depends on this chain of events working perfectly. And if just one link breaks, the whole system can fall apart.
Think about it in the context of this crash. Was there some miscommunication between the pilots, air traffic control, maybe equipment malfunction? Did someone miss a visual cue? Any one of these things, even something small, it could have been that weakest link that led to this tragedy.
Like a domino effect. One mistake, and then everything just, it all falls apart. And, speaking of communication, I noticed the source used the word heartbreaking to describe this whole incident. It brings home the human cost.
That's a good example of figurative language. The word heartbreaking, they don't mean it literally, of course.
Right.
It's used to evoke the emotion, the sadness that comes with the loss of life.
It definitely adds another layer to the story. Reminds us that these incidents, they're not just statistics. Real people are affected, and their stories should be told with sensitivity.
Exactly. And understanding figurative language, that's how you really appreciate the nuances of English. It's not just the words themselves, but the meaning behind them.
Okay, so putting it all together, what do we know about what probably caused this crash?
Well, the investigation's still going on, but the evidence so far suggests that the Black Hawk pilot, they probably misidentified the passenger plane, maybe mistook a departing flight for the approaching one, thought they had a clear path.
The source uses the word misidentification, which is it's a perfect example of how one word can sum up a whole complex concept. And the word costly, that really hits home, about the devastating consequences.
Right. And it brings us back to that importance of situational awareness, clear communication, and that question of VFR versus IFR, what role did that play? The investigators will be looking at all this very closely.
The source also mentioned a couple other plane crashes, like the Korean Air incident and then that missile attack. Are those just more examples of aviation disasters?
Well, they serve a couple purposes. First, they highlight how risky aviation is. Accidents can happen even with all the safety measures in place.
Yeah.
And second, they give us a chance to practice the vocabulary we've learned.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Like the Korean Air incident, they had to do a go-around maneuver, which I guess means aborting the landing and trying again.
Exactly.
And then they had to make a belly landing, which I'm assuming means landing without the landing gear.
You got it. And the missile attack, while it's definitely a scary reminder of, global events and all that, it also introduces us to words like detonates, which is a more intense way of saying explodes.
It's amazing how even tragic events can teach us so much about language. Speaking of learning, this whole deep dive, it made me think of this awesome tool I've been using, FunFluent.
Ah, yeah, FunFluent. Great platform for learning English through movies and TV shows.
It's like having this interactive language tutor built right into your entertainment. You can see how idioms, phrasal verbs, all that advanced vocab, how it's actually used, makes it so much easier to understand and remember.
It really does. It makes language learning way more fun and effective too.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, I think it'd be good to, recap some of the key language takeaways we've talked about.
Yeah, let's do that.
What do you think?
So we started with idioms, like remember laser focused.
Mm-hmm.
Paint such a vivid picture of intense concentration.
And then we unpack that phrasal verb short final, how short modifies final to make this specific, aviation term.
Right, and we had some advanced vocabulary too, like transponder
Yeah.
and instrument flight rules, IFR, really important for understanding the ins and outs of aviation.
And that proverb, I love that proverb, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, really highlights how everything's connected, how even small mistakes can have huge consequences.
Yeah,
We even talked about figurative language, like using the word heartbreaking to describe, the emotional impact of this whole thing.
exactly.
So what does it all mean? What can we take away from all this? This deep dive into the language of the Blackhawk helicopter crash.
Well, this incident, it's a terrible tragedy, but it reminds us how important clear communication is, situational awareness, and always striving for safety in aviation. And it shows how language can help us break down these complicated events, make them understandable for everyone.
It really does make you think about the human side of things and how important it is to understand both the technical and emotional aspects of these incidents.
Yeah. And it raises a really interesting question. What can we learn from this to prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening again? Are there better ways to communicate, better training, maybe even new technologies to improve safety?
It's a question we should all be asking,
Yeah,
not just people in the aviation industry, but everyone, because we all rely on complex systems every day.
that's right. Whether it's healthcare, finance, technology, clear communication, paying attention to details, it's crucial.
Well, to all our listeners out there, we'll leave you with this thought. What resonated with you today, and how can you apply these insights to your own life to communicate more clearly, be more aware, and just, commit to safety in everything you do?
And remember, language is powerful, so keep learning, keep exploring, keep asking those insightful questions. That's what makes these deep dives so enriching.
And be sure to join us next time for another fascinating deep dive into a brand new topic. Until then, stay curious.